Okay, so President Barack Obama made history. I don't know if you know, but what separates us from all the people we fight in wars is that we're the good guys. I don't know if you know. That's why we fight wars, because there's evil, and we have to go stop the evil. So that's why we show up, right? That's why we saved the world from fascism. We saved it from Hitler. We saved it from communism. That's our thing, right? We're supposed to be the good guys. We're the guys on the white horse with the white hat. So it turns out, though, sometimes when we're out there thinking we're doing good, we're not doing good. Like when we were doing, illegal wars in Iraq, and turns out that Dick Cheney and George Bush and Condoleezza Rice, they all ordered torture, right? So that's called a war crime. You're not supposed to torture people.
But did you read about the New York Times? Are you getting to that by any chance? Could I throw something in?
Sure.
The New York Times today decided to call what Bush and Cheney and everybody did torture. Like today, in 2014. For the first time. They've decided to go, all that stuff we've been reporting on for 11 years. Turns out it was torture.
That stuff we've been calling enhanced interrogation techniques, which I love they call it enhanced interrogation techniques, because we don't call it torture because we're doing it, right? So it's enhanced, which makes it sound nice, right?
Their sentence is this: when the first revelations emerged a decade ago, the situation was murky. It was murky.
Was never murky. Isn't that funny? I knew exactly that the Iraq War was a lie. I knew. Comedian. I knew it. I knew that there was a housing bubble happening. Me, comedian. I knew it. So, and I also knew that torture wasn't murky. I knew it was torture, and I knew why they were doing it. So that's me as a comedian. So when I know that I can figure this stuff out, that the guys at the New York Times knew this. They just didn't want to say it. They didn't want to get on the wrong side of power. And that's why the New York Times is not really that good of a newspaper.
Their next sentence is...
Jimmy. The New York Times is the newspaper of record, with the record of being late to every moral issue in this country's history.
Yeah, they just came out in favor of medical marijuana and legalization of marijuana about 40 years too late, right? Now they're on the torture thing about 14 years after.
I'll read the next sentence. The details
Thanks, guys, you're a lot of help.
Yeah.
The details about what the Central Intelligence Agency did in its interrogation rooms were vague.
Vague.
It was murky and vague.
Wow.
Sure. So we just took the government's word for it and repeated it.
That's right. All that waterboarding.
Yeah.
So vague.
So
I hope now the New York Times will properly describe Maureen Dowd's columns as an atrocity.
Okay, so President Barack Obama finally came out. I think, what is this, 7 years into his presidency?
6, yeah.
2 years into or 3 years into his second term, and he came out, what?
He's exhausted from prosecuting them.
Yes. So Barack Obama didn't prosecute any of those torture crimes. He never prosecuted anybody because Barack Obama said all those torture crimes happened in the past, and Barack Obama's looking towards the future. And when I heard that, I felt a lot better. You know why? Because all the crimes I've committed, they're in the past, too. Oh, I'm so glad we're not prosecuting past crimes anymore. I bet those people in prison are pissed off they committed their crimes in the future.
Jimmy, when I was a young man in New York City, and I was drinking back then, and I would go out at night and murder prostitutes, I was immature back then.
Also, when the cops would come arrest you, you'd be like, hey, I did that yesterday. All right?
Yeah. Barack Obama finally came out, said we're torturing people. He said we tortured people, and well, here's what he said. Can I play it for you? Here's what he said. Okay, ready?
Sure.
Even before I came into office, I was very clear that in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, we did some things that were wrong. We did a whole lot of things that were right, but we tortured some folks.
But he's going to put the little caveat in. We did a lot of things that were right? We did a lot of things that were right. Okay, it was all right.
What did we do that was right? I don't remember that.
I don't... I got me too.
We started a gigantic war that cost us billions of dollars and killed thousands of innocent people with the wrong country. Where did we fit in something right in all that?
You got me, Frank. You got me, buddy. So here he goes on.
I think he just didn't want us to feel bad.
That's right. That's actually exactly right.
It's exactly right. He doesn't want us to feel bad about the fact that we're just like the Nazis sometimes.
Yeah, we did some things right.
Sometimes.
Come on.
We did some things that were contrary to our values.
Oh.
I understand why it happened.
Yeah, you understand why it happened? Because we had some criminal motherfuckers running our government. That's why. Because they invaded a country for oil around a pack of lies. That's why. And then they tortured people to make them give information that was false, that said the Al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein was working together. You mean that's why you understand? I don't think that's what you mean,
And
right?
they continue-
Because that's why it happened. That is why it happened. It wasn't that they were trying to get information. They were torturing people to make them say that Al-Qaeda was working with Saddam Hussein when they weren't. That's why you torture people, not to get information. You torture people so they say stuff that isn't true that you want them to say.
Jimmy, he said we did some things right. Okay.
So here he goes. So here he.
Also, wait, he says like, what did he say? It's understandable or.
Yes.
You understand why it happened.
Understand when in the wake of a crime does a policeman or does anyone say that? Well, this person was murdered. Look, I understand why it happened. I have to arrest the person anyway. When does that nuance ever come into any kind of crime?
And by the way, murder, to me, it's like, it's not a better analogy would be like rape, because, torture is like this heinous, horrible thing that hasn't, and then you're doing it intentionally on purpose. It's like rape. So I understand why the rape happened. That you would never say that. You would never say that. But he's saying, I understand why torture happened. I understand why we turned into animals. That's what he's saying. Okay, let's go.
I think it's important when we look back to recall how afraid people were after the Twin Towers fell and the Pentagon had been hit and the plane in Pennsylvania had fallen and people did not know whether more attacks were imminent. And there was enormous pressure on our law enforcement and our national security teams to try to deal with this.
Yeah, so if your job is really tough, you get to commit war crimes. That's what he's saying.
Time to torture.
Yeah, so if your job is really, that's really what he's saying. He's saying if your job is hard, and maybe you need to relax a little with some torture. Right? So if you're stressed, so a lot of times what happens in war, people get stressed, and a way to release it, you torture some people. So is that what he's saying? I think that's what he's saying. Okay.
I almost in a sense think it's worse than that, because it's just like this complete abdication of leadership. Like, yeah, exactly. We were scared and we were terrified.
Right.
And there was enormous pressure.
That's why you have values.
That's why you have values, and that's why you have leadership and smart people making those critical decisions, because they were admittedly hard decisions. And you're allowed to be wrong, but you're not really allowed to be immoral.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Ben. Great.
But you know what? All those people in the Middle East are really bad.
Yeah. All right, so he's got a little bit more to say.
It's important for us not to feel too sanctimonious in retrospect about the tough job that those folks had.
Yeah, that's exactly what you'd say to anyone responsible for heinous human crimes. You'd say, in retrospect, don't give yourself such a hard time about it.
Yeah, he sounds like my therapist. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're afraid, you're under stress, torture relieves a lot of that pressure.
Yeah.
Isn't that what your therapist says?
Why is he what was the point of this?
What did he think he was going to get out of this?
Can I answer that? I think he doesn't want the torturers to have their feelings hurt.
You don't want to hurt the torch. Good point, Steph.
Instead of prosecuting Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, and Rice for their crimes, let's just hug it out with them.
Yeah, let's hug it out. Exactly. I like how he says, don't get sanctimonious.
Yeah, because, waterboarding is bad, but sanctimony is really reprehensible.
Oh, I mean, who hasn't waterboarded prisoners over 180 times, right? See, he who hasn't, throw the first stone. That's what I say.
I would rather have an electrode attached to my balls than have someone be sanctimonious to me.
Oh.
In a heartbeat.
Don't be see only the sanctimonious hold war criminals accountable, Ben. Remember how sanctimonious they were at Nuremberg? Oh, I mean, they were so disgusting with the sanctimony, I almost kvetched.
They were so mean-spirited towards Goebbels.
Yes, they were. They were mean to him, and they were sanctimonious.
It's like
there was. You have to remember the circumstances in which Nazism flourished and in which the Holocaust happened. It It was a very tense time for Germans.
It was what?
Tense time.
Oh, it was a very tense time. I'm sorry.
Why, legitimately, from a political point of view, what was the point of this statement? Like, did Barack Obama wake up this morning and a couple of advisors come in and they say, you haven't seemed really weak in weeks, it's August 6th and you haven't seemed like a giant pussy since June.
Exactly.
He said he said we tortured some folks with the same casualness, but he'd say we bought a zoo.
Yes, he did. Frank, and I'm glad that we don't hold ourselves to a higher standard, or else we might have some sleepless nights about what we did. Other nations looking down their noses at us, thinking they're better than us just because they follow international law and don't torture prisoners held in jail for over a decade without a trial. You know what? They're just jealous. And sanctimonious. I'll tell you that, goddamn sanctimony. So there you go. That's his big... Well, the reason why he came out and he had to talk about it because there's that thing happening right now where the report's coming out, the CIA report on torture, and they redacted everything.
Yeah.
So what they did was, the report is about who did torturing, who ordered torture, and where it happened, because it happened in foreign countries, didn't happen on our soil, and American agents acting in other countries. So that's important to know what countries it happened in, and it's important to know who did it and who ordered it. But what the CIA did, is they redacted, meaning they blacked out all the countries that were involved, all the people that were involved, even the names of the people who were tortured got blacked out. So basically,
That document was had more blackouts than Artie Lang. Am I
right? The good news is that report's going to make an excellent Mad Lib.
So what you're basically left with is a report with no nouns. So it's just a bunch of verbs strung together.
Right.
This happened. Who did it? We don't know. Where it happened? I don't know. When? It's all blacked out. But just verbs of things happening. But they're not connected to anything. And again, that's our own CIA. The people who help to protect us, they also need to not be able to be honest with us, too. They're like another criminal organization trying to fight other criminals.
Maybe
that report was so hard to read. I thought it was a Cormac McCarthy novel.
Maybe if there's going to be an investigation and a report on crimes committed by the CIA, maybe you don't let the CIA have a look at it first.
Yeah, how about that?
Yeah.
How about that? Yeah.
Oh, we
Obama's
can't say
soothing
that.
Tone, you're supposed to deduce from his soothing tone that he's saying, don't worry, we're not going to prosecute anyone.
Yes, that's exactly what he's saying. So
that message has already been delivered.
Yeah, that's clear. That's clear.
But we've been under pressure. I mean, I hope the torturers are okay.